Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 15th of September 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio. And Diane Rasmussen will also be joining us by live video link. Well, epic events in UK over the weekend, or Saturday, very large protests in London. And let's just have a little look at that on screen. And as we can see from this aerial picture, a very, very large number of people attended the demonstration. Estimates vary. I've had some estimates from people who were there on the spot saying they thought about 800,000. Other people have said million. Tommy Robinson claimed 3 million. I'm going to stick at around that 800 to a million people, but certainly it was a lot of people. And clearly a lot of people felt motivated enough to travel into London in order to see exactly what was going on, and also to meet up with other like-minded people. What's your estimates, Ben? Do you go with the Tommy Robinson 3 million, or do you think that's a bit high?
I think it's probably a bit high, and but I think the BBC was saying about 100,000, weren't they? So somewhere between those two. I know someone on the ground who said 1 million, so I think that's probably about right.
Well, I think the BBC was about 150,000. Since we're having a discussion about these events, let's bring Diane in. Welcome, Diane. You were watching a lot of this on Saturday, obviously from a distance, but what was your feeling about the numbers?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing, I think, starting from around 11:30 in the morning until it went off around 6:30 in the evening. And basically what happened was I watched the first part, which was covered by Steve James, or Edge of the Matrix, who started the live stream. And he was just walking around talking to people as he normally does. He's a friend of the UK column, asking people about their opinions about gender ideology and things not necessarily related to what we thought the protest was for. So it was very interesting just to get a feel from people on the ground. And it seemed as though the people who were there generally that he spoke to were there for the right reasons, or they believed they were there for the right reasons in terms of saving England, saving the country, and speaking out for women's rights and the other issues that we would expect to hear. But it seemed as though the crowds just kept growing and growing, and it was really fun. I looked at several different live streams, both from the air and on the ground, the official stream on Tommy Robinson's X channel, as well as just some other individual streamers. And some of them, it was really difficult to see where it was actually coming from, or who was going, or where they were. I do know one person, a friend of mine, who was there, and she said that she was stuck on the bridge over the river, and there were thousands of people both in front of her and behind her, and they were stuck. They couldn't get anywhere. So it does seem as though it would probably be difficult, I would imagine, to truly get a real estimate on the numbers.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, certainly all the reports that I had from people who were present said that overwhelmingly there was a very friendly atmosphere. People were getting on extremely well. The trouble was described to me as some bad boys who were off to one side doing their own thing, but overwhelmingly for the bulk of people there, they were there in a genuine protest, but the mood was very friendly. There was also a great mix of people, black, white, all other colours, religions, people mixing without any problem at all, contrary to the way it was reported. And what about yourself, Ben? Is that the sort of feedback that you had through?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a real mixed crowd. Absolutely.
Okay, so the key question for you, why do you think people were there?
Well, I think that the concept of Britishness is being challenged at the moment in a number of different ways. And actually people were very clearly out on the street because they wanted to try and reclaim some of their national identity. But I would say one of the things that really struck me is coming out of it, not quite sure what national identity was being presented to us. That was my overriding sense of it.
That's a very good point. Well, if that's your opinion, Ben, and I think a very credible one, let's have a listen to the business secretary, Peter Kyle, who was being interviewed about the demonstration.
What worries me most is the divisions in our society and other societies and other democratic societies. There are It's not even the left and the right at the moment. There are communities that are being driven further apart. And there are figures, such as Tommy Robinson, that is able to touch into a sense of disquiet and grievance in the community, in our society. A lot of it goes back to its roots in the financial crisis and the impact that had on communities around the country. And we haven't been able to bring our communities back together again since. So I think these are moments that are klaxon calls to us in public life to redouble our efforts to address the big concerns that people right across our country have, and immigration is a big concern. It's a concern that I and the Prime Minister share very deeply, and we are acting on, and other concerns as well. But we have to do it in a way that can start to bring communities back together again.
So you have a demonstration, 800,000 people, 1 million people together, and the minister describes the problem as people being split apart. I find that interesting, but according to him, Ben, the key problem was financial.
Well, yes, and I'm sure it was all someone else's fault as well. Nothing to do with Peter Kyle and Keir Starmer.
Well, we'll consider that in a minute, but yeah, let's reinforce that point because, of course, other reports in the BBC, such as this one, leader of the Lib Dems saying that, well, all of this trouble with the asylum seekers and the hotels, this is all Farage's fault and the Tories' fault. So this is the cheap political blame game. Meanwhile, the uniparty system that we've got in UK continues to do its own thing. I thought it would be worthwhile to actually just do a little bit of assessment on what the whole point of the rally was. And I found that actually I had to go to ChatGPT in order to see what it said. And the first point it raised is that the primary thing there was opposition to what the organisers and many attendees saw as uncontrolled or illegal immigration, which I think is a pretty accurate report. But what was the source that ChatGPT had to use? Well, surprisingly, it was Al Jazeera. Let's go on to the second one here, because it said that a key topic for people present in London was free speech and national identity. The marchers also framed their rally in terms of free speech, British heritage, national culture, and concerns about being heard. Thought that was quite a poignant point. People think that they are not being taken any notice of at the moment, and I think they're absolutely correct. Where was the source for this particular one? Well, it was here, back to Al Jazeera. So we've got AI at work, and it's so desperate to find out what's happening in 1 million people march in London, it's choosing Al Jazeera. Clearly, that's telling us something about our mainstream media. And if I go on to number 3 here, it's people reacting to the current political climate. And what was the source that our illustrious AI used for that? Well, it was the National newspaper. So I found this very interesting that AI was struggling to find out what the reports were about this massive demonstration in London. And of course, with the BBC labelling it about 150,000 people, I suppose we shouldn't be too surprised. But if we take apart what's really happening and why people are really concerned, we can ask this question: what is the current political climate? I've attempted to put some meat on the bones here. That the first one, I think, is we've got warmongering. We've got a government ramping up for war whenever possible, wherever possible. We've also got destruction of the national identity. Mass migration and positive discrimination is clearly part of that. And significantly, this is recognised not only by white British people, this is also recognised by migrants who are now settled in UK. They realise that mass migration is dangerous to all our futures. And this is why at the rally we had people of different cultures and backgrounds and colours. We've got number 3 here, the destruction of the male-female identity and the family. And of course, the woke culture is helping this destruction. And it's that woke culture that's being pushed by the government itself. If we go on number 4, we've got the deliberate sexual grooming of children via religious and sex education and the child sexuality education, which is coming in through UNESCO and the World Health Organization. We've got the suppression of free speech under cover of the Online Harms Bill and a whole range of other legislation which has been coming through. We've got the division of society by malicious targeted media and propaganda. So this is coming from the state itself. It's nothing to do with the demonstrators. It's coming in from the state. And if we go on through, we can put number 7 in here. We've got state-imposed control by means of fabricated fear. COVID, lockdown, and climate change are 2 key ones of those. Number 8, we've got state-facilitated corruption and perversion of Westminster, civil service, and the institutions. And if I bring in a number 9 here, state-facilitated destruction of the national health and well-being by corruption of the food supply and the NHS, amongst other things. So these are all pretty serious and blatantly obvious policies which are coming in from our own government. Just summarise this little bit. This actually was the page that ChatGPT brought up, so you can see how it appeared to me. I'm just going to drop over the top of this Gaza and Ukraine because, of course, it appears that this particular rally, there was positive support for Israel and presumably everything it was doing in Gaza. And apart from mention of the tragic death of the young Ukrainian lady, nothing was really being said about stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine. So there were some rather interesting undertones. But if I just end this segment here, I thought it pertinent to bring up the definition which the government is using of extremism. We've got 1, negate or destroy the fundamental rights and freedoms of others, undermine, overturn or replace the UK system of liberal parliamentary democracy, and 3, intentionally create a permissive environment for others to achieve these results. So the definition to me of extremism seems to fit our own government in the first instance, much more than it does the demonstrators, the 1 million people protesting in London. And if I end on this one here from Protect UK, if we have a look at their definition of extreme right-wing terrorism, of course, all of those 1 million people on the streets were being branded as extreme right-wing by British mainstream media, a quite disgusting accusation. But it seems to me that the label is deliberately designed to attack society itself. So I'm putting some complex things in there, Ben, but it seems to me the biggest threat comes from our own government, not the 1 million people on the streets.
Not all of the 1 million people on the streets, actually. I think this is the issue, right? Is that these things get treated by the commentariat and by politicians as these homogenous lumps of people where everyone believes the same things, and that's just fundamentally not true, actually. So, some people in the chat box pointing out, as we'll get into, actually, that the people behind this, heavy Zionist influence, very political. Lots of conflicts of interest, particularly with some of the big money people involved and who were featured. But the everyday, man and woman on the street, I think most of them were there for the right reasons. Absolutely. And they see their country slipping away. They want to go out and do something about it. Absolutely. Good on them, quite frankly. One of the things I was particularly happy about looking at this over the weekend was that there was no violence, no significant violence. I know there were a few arrests, but there was the potential for this to go quite badly wrong, actually, and it didn't. And I'm glad things were kept calm. And obviously one of the best people around to help keep things calm is Elon Musk. Let's have a little listen to what he had to say.
Violence is going to come to you. You will have no choice. You're in a fundamental situation here where whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die. You either fight back or you die. And that's the truth.
Today, Elon, I think the British public are telling the world that they're ready to fight back.
Good. Yes.
Come on, Great Britain.
Brian just said that's pathetic. I completely agree with you. Notice we got really very little reaction there from the crowd, actually. But there's Musk saying, you've got to fight back or die. That's his message.
Isn't that an extreme right-wing message coming from Musk?
I don't know if it's right-wing or whatever it is, but, he's hardly trying to reduce tensions in the country, which I think would probably be a good idea given everything that's been going on. And let's just have a little look at his T-shirt. This really grabbed me. You got the little one eye symbol there. The full T-shirt says, "What would Orwell think?" And I think Orwell would think that Elon Musk is a very dangerous and very scary man, actually. That's what I think Orwell would think. This wasn't just limited to Musk. There was a lot of incitement generally around things like the ISIS flag being attacked by some Maoris on stage who'd been flown in for this purpose. Again, this is really stretching the limits of Britishness here. Like there's a very odd mixture of different cultures and different things happening. And then obviously they went after the Palestine flag, and this is not necessary. This is incitement for me. There are horrific things happening in Palestine right now. This is a very pro-Israel event. Tommy Robinson himself is a proud Zionist. There is a very strong case to be made that that's ultimately who's controlling him, and then ultimately, he's setting this event up. Should we assume that that's who's behind this event? I think it's probably quite safe to say that it is. Seeing this kind of stuff on stage is not good for me, and this just makes it very easy for people on the other side of the argument to point at and say, look, violence, look, hatred, and actually it's just fundamentally not helpful, right? And of course, there was a counter-protest, as is always the way at the moment, right? So there's a protest happening, and lo and behold, there is a counter-protest happening. This pattern is repeated every single time one of these things happens. I reported on an event in Plymouth earlier in the year. Same thing was happening there. I went to an event in Plymouth last Sunday. We had exactly the same thing happening. You had the flags on one side, and then you had Stand Up to Racism on the other side. Stand Up to Racism behind this, the March Against Fascism, Unite Against Tommy Robinson. It's all about Tommy. Yeah, he's the figurehead for all of this. This was run by, or certainly led by, Narinder Kaur. I hope I'm saying that correctly. The woman holding the sign up on the right-hand side there. She is a Pakistani woman from Newcastle. And this is the feminine left wing. So this was a women-only march. You can just see that it says women against the far right on the big banner just behind her. So this is the feminine left wing against the supposedly masculine right wing, and I think that the Tommy Robinson march is probably dominated by men. I don't think it was all men, right? But they're setting this up as a very deliberate. This is another divide and rule: left v right, man v women, and this is about stopping effective reconciliation in the country that needs to happen in order for us to effectively progress past this stuff, right? And Stand Up to Racism, we've talked about before, basically directly linked into the top of the Labour Party, linked into the military intelligence agencies, very unclear where all the money is coming from for them to churn these signs out. I mean, they're putting hundreds of thousands of these signs out on a weekly basis. This, we can just see here, was very closely linked into the unions. You've got Unison, TUC, Unite, and et cetera, and we need to have a bit more of a look into this for future shows. But to get the supposedly union-aligned, sneering, metropolitan, liberal, progressive view on the march, let's have a little listen to Paul Mason.
What you're seeing here is probably...
Oh.
Someone going to run?
Bit of a problem there.
What you're seeing here is probably the biggest far-right demonstration ever held in Britain. And I've been among this crowd, and I think it's obvious that many of the people here are wearing our flag as a badge of their own white identity and as a mark of hatred of our multicultural, multinational society. No, there are more progressive people than this. What this is the radicalised mass base of the Reform Party and the Tories. Most people here would have voted Tory, some might have voted Labour, but this is by and large a plebeian, working class, explicitly racist demonstration, and I'm afraid to say it will very likely descend into violence when it gets to Whitehall.
Military intelligence asset Paul Mason talking about the flag as essentially being a symbol of hatred for multi-ethnic Britain. He describes the group as the radicalised mass base of reform and conservative voters, and he even used the word plebeian. He called them plebs. Isn't that amazing?
No, it's not amazing, actually.
No,
it's not amazing.
I mean, it tells you a lot about what these people actually think, right? And this same line of thought extended to Richard Bergen, a member of Parliament. This tweet here I thought was quite amazing, talking about the fact that we are in an incredibly dangerous moment, which I do actually agree with, by the way, but probably not for the same reasons that he's saying. And essentially, he goes on to say, we not only face the threat of a far-right government coming to power for the first time in our history, I guess he means reform, but also a violent far-right street movement on a scale not seen here in decades, if ever. Apparently, that's what this march was. This is a violent far-right street movement, and then goes on to say this street movement, led by convicted criminal Tommy Robinson, who's not really the leader of this thing, he just happened to organise this march, is especially dangerous for Black, Muslim, Jewish and other minority communities. All right, so there's plenty of Black people there. It was definitely anti-Muslim, I will certainly say that. But the idea that this is dangerous for Jewish people, I think, is absolutely crazy, because very clearly, you know, the whole thing was avowedly Zionist. And in fact, we had this guy, Avi Yemeni, from Rebel News, was wandering around broadcasting. He was a former IDF sniper, basically bragged about killing children in Gaza, effectively running a Zionist control operation, as I would see it. And he may well be the guy who's pulling Tommy Robinson's strings, I don't know. And just to sum up, this was a message that I was sent by a mate of mine who was actually there and said it was good. There was well over 1 million people. The original police report said over 3 million. MSM said 110,000, all very peaceful. Majority of the police we came across real decent, smiling, chatty. Riot police came out once most people had left so that they can antagonise and get reactions for the news. Sounds about right.
It does.
Yeah.
Ben, thank you very much for that. Diane, let's bring you back with us. And what have you got?
Yeah, I just have a few comments and a little bit more coverage to add to this discussion of Saturday. One thing I want to show is a little bit more from the Elon Musk confrontation between himself and the audience, which was along with Tommy Robinson. So let's play the rest of that.
And then you see how much violence there's on the left, with our friend Charlie Kirk getting murdered in cold blood this week, and people on the left celebrating it openly. The left is the party of murder and celebrating murder. I mean, let that sink in for a minute. That's who we're dealing with here. That is who we're dealing with.
So that brings up a couple of things for me. First of all, the right versus left, of course, which he repeated several times. And I just want to say, Ben, I see your point about what you were saying about the right versus left in this particular situation. However, I would like to point out that I am not on the left because I am a woman and I want to preserve my own rights as an actual woman, as opposed to some women who put themselves on the left or those who say they are women. And that's a very different situation. So, but the problem, I think, is that when I was seeing some of the sort of counter demonstration going on, the counter protests, where were these women, actual or trans, who were sort of trying to take their own position on the situation, but they were so small in numbers compared to the actual official part of the demonstration. I think it's interesting also to note the timing of this event, with this being on the 13th of September. So we've got just 2 days after the anniversary of 9/11, which is still a very sore spot for lots of people around the world, particularly Americans, of course. We had the Charlie Kirk situation. And I know there's a lot of speculation circulating around the internet at this point around all of the things surrounding whatever happened with Charlie Kirk. But the timing is also, again, very interesting. That was on the eve of 9/11. And we see all the Charlie Kirk messages were weaved throughout the entire day. As I said, I watched all of it. We also see here, there's another photo of him saying, God bless Charlie Kirk, never forgotten. So it's like 9/11, never forget. And this was a man holding this photo of him on the stage behind where Tommy and the other speakers, who again, of course, were, as has been said earlier, Israeli supporters, Zionist supporters, generally speaking, were the ones who were out there. And we also have the death of the Irena Zaruska situation, the Ukrainian refugee who was supposedly stabbed in the North Carolina in recent times. So all of this, they're positioning Tommy as the hero, as the god, and all of the people who were speaking and introducing him throughout the official event were saying, "Oh, we wouldn't be here without Tommy. He's like this god worship almost figure that they were making him out to be, as though he's just this average working class chap who's going to save the country." When actually, again, I think that most of the people in attendance were probably in that situation of just wanting to do what's best for the country and returning to a more traditional form of Britain and England. But I also think that if you look at who actually organized the event and how it was supported and how an average person could not take over London at this level, and then to have all of this happening while just the scope of the event, there was video screens all the way up and down where you could watch the event for people who couldn't get close to the stage. And there's absolutely no way that an individual person who doesn't feel as though they can even speak up for themselves in the country at this stage would be able to take over the capital city at this level. So I think there's some questions to ask about what's behind this and what drove it, and again, what is actually going on in the background. So those people who say they were out for looking out for Tommy and trying to help him because he's done all these great things for us, I think needs to maybe reconsider their position just a bit. Brian?
Diane, thank you for that. And we'll certainly be talking about this more in extra after the news today. But key bit is a lot of very, very good people on the streets. They need to know exactly what is attacking them in this country. And I think getting information across as everything that's happening through and with the UK's government is the right way to go. But we'll deal with this more in extra time. Now, big thank you as always to everybody wherever you are in the world who's supporting UK Column. We can only do what we do with your financial support and help. If you are watching or listening in to us for today's news and you're not already a supporter, then if you go to the UK Column website and click here to support our work, you can become a member or make a donation or both, or purchase through the shop. And we'll be very grateful for that. Now, tonight at 7 p.m, we've got a repeat with germ warfare, talking about all big events being fabricated. That's with Nick Hudson, which I think is an interesting topic and something we should all keep our attention on, because nothing at the moment is quite as it seems. Also, UK Column on location in York, coming up Saturday, the 18th of October. The key thing is that tickets are now sold out, so we're looking at the live stream. I'm going to emphasise this. The tickets are now sold.
Well, hey.
Yes, a huge thank you to everybody who's bought one, and we really look forward to seeing you. But we're also encouraging people to join us via the online view. And of course, if you do that, we will be speaking to everybody, whether you're with us in person or further afield. Diane, you've got this one here for the Food and Health Festival coming up on the 28th September.
Yes, I've mentioned this in the last couple of weeks as well, but just as a reminder that this is coming up, sponsored by Common Knowledge Edinburgh, of which I'm a member of the executive committee. It will be a focus on alternative health solutions, local food, the importance of real food, the importance of farming. So there'll be some vendors, there'll be some talks throughout the day, including Charles Mellett, who is coming up to join us to speak from his perspective on farming. So I think it'll be a great day. Tickets are free. It's from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and the location and the postcode are right there on the flyer. So please join us.
Brilliant. Thank you, Diane. Well, Ben, back to you. And the subject is chaos, the undertone of UK.
Yes, Chaos Agents. Again, I think I used the same title last week, and I'm going to pull together a few of the threads that I talked about last week. Back to this guy, Sir Paul Marshall, and GB News. And I'm going to link him to Radical Marxism, Common Purpose, good, bit of an old UK column favourite in there. The Fabian Society, the World Economic Forum, Gates Foundation, Omajar, the UN, and actually posed the question once again: is what is GB News actually up to, and how is this guy's interests aligning with all of those organisations that I've just mentioned? Now, I used the same image last week. Where I talked about Marshall's relationship with George Soros, who put money into Marshall's hedge fund and essentially created him as a significant financial force in the UK, while at the same time funding left-wing organisations like Black Lives Matter, the International Rescue Committee, and the fact that these two wings to the beast are creating chaos in our discourse and in our society, and ultimately out on the streets, basically, so that people like Marshall and Soros can profit from this. And I also talked about this organisation, the Black Equity Organisation, which was co-founded by David Lammy. This is about delivering equity, which is beyond equality, and this is about equal outcomes. This is communist. It can only be delivered by a totalitarian state intervening in the social order on a constant basis. Yeah, this is what this is. There's no other way to understand it. Black Equity Organisation, and it's directly linked to Paul Marshall, actually. So I delivered those two as separate segments last week. This week, I'm going to tie them both together, right? So we got equity, Black Equity Organisation, its trustee board, very interesting people. You're going to have a look at this. We'll provide a link. And what we're particularly interested in today is this chap here. This is Rick Lewis, who is a British-American a mixed race guy, and he leans very heavily on the black bit, right? Obviously, he's on Black Equity Organisation. He's trading very heavily on this side of his identity, and his background is that he's a big-time real estate investor. He's the executive chairman of this thing, which is Tristan Capital Management. Hundreds of millions of dollars of assets under management. He's also got a load of other interests at play. He runs something called the Black Heart Foundation. And he's also, importantly, for the interests of today, on the board of governors of something called King Solomon Academy. Yeah, and King Solomon Academy is an academy school in Marylebone in central London, which, if we just look at the landing page here, is pushing quite a specific demographic agenda, I would say. This is central London. Let's have a little look at the little girls on the front page of the website here. And this is run by ARC Schools. Yeah, which is, I think, quite well known to us. We've covered it on the column before. And ARC Schools run a load of these academies around the UK. This is the ARC Schools website. And who's on the board of trustees for ARC Schools? Paul Marshall, and also Ian Wace as well, which is the Marshall Wace hedge fund that George Soros helped create to bring it back to where we started.
It's interesting how the big money in the hedge funds are always somewhere there in the background.
Indeed, it is. So Paul Marshall through radical Marxism, and now we're going to take him on to... Oh, actually, no, before I go ahead, the gentleman I was just talking about, Rick Lewis, is also on the board of the Earthshot Prize, which is Prince William's big sustainability play, and that was done work with Common Purpose at the end of last year, so it's linked in there as well. Also, Marshall's is working with the LSE, amazingly. So London School of Economics, which was founded by the Fabian Society back in 1895. So the LSE is a Fabian Society organisation. On this, they are hammering out a new world, apparently. And, this just takes us directly into Arch Fabian, Tony Blair, and half of the Labour cabinet, every single Labour Prime Minister that's ever served as Prime Minister of the country. And Marshall is very closely linked to them. He's been delivering lectures for them. This one, which we'll provide a link to, was actually given. This was an interview by Manoush Shafiq, who's just been announced as Chief Economic Advisor to Keir Starmer. And this is part of his role, formal role at the LSE, running something called the Marshall Institute. And he's actually built a whole huge building for the LSE, right? So there's not some kind of casual relationship that he has with the London School of Economics, which was founded by the Fabian Society. He's actually spending tens, potentially hundreds of millions of pounds building physical infrastructure. Yeah, this is the Marshall Institute. The Marshall Institute is particularly interested in social impact, which is the transformation of society. That's literally what this institute has been set up for. And it is run by, go to the people page, this guy was one of the directors, Kieran Boyle, who is a very, very, very naughty boy into a lot of very bad things, Mr. Boyle, who amongst many things is a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. Yeah.
Yeah, this is shadow government.
Yes.
Effectively, this is the powerhouse running out of sight of most of the public. It's there when you go looking for it, but it's something which needs to be brought to the surface.
Yes.
If we're going to be able to explain what is causing all this mayhem and chaos in UK.
Absolutely. And I would certainly imagine that the vast majority of GB News viewers have no idea and would object quite strenuously to the idea that Paul Marshall is working with Black Equity Organisation and the World Economic Forum, because these are the World Economic Forum in particular. I mean, these are the bad guys, right? And surely if you're a nationalist, GB News, you should be protecting the interests of the country, but actually working behind the scenes and actually hand selecting. I'm sure Paul Marshall was intimately involved in finding and hiring this guy, Kieran Boyle. He knows exactly what he's about. Make that make sense. You can't. Then finally, back to the GB News website. Let's have a look at their investors. Legatum describes itself as a global partnership with a mission at its core. And, some classic corporate guff. You go to their website, they're a team of people bound together by a shared desire to make the world better for everybody, apparently. It's basically a slug of tax-efficient money based in Dubai, wanting to change your life without your permission, quite frankly, run by these people, Mark Stollerson, Alan McCormick, who's actually the chairman of GB News. Yeah, so this Legatum thing is not just funding it; he's also got executive responsibility for how the thing is being run. Two other investors, Philip Vassalou, Christopher Chandler, all fascinating. We don't have time to get into it in a huge amount of detail. How did Legatum go about transforming the world? They have these three funds: Luminos Fund, the End Fund, the Freedom Fund, and where does that take us to? Straight into this world. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Omidyar Network, UNICEF, Children's Investment Fund Foundation, which is Chris Hone, another Blair ally, and ultimately the US State Department, amongst many, many, many others. Yeah, and that's who Paul Marshall, the founding investor of GB News, owner of Unheard, owner of The Spectator, is directing a lot of his time, money, and attention in the background.
Ben, thank you very much. Many, many questions there. We'll talk a little bit more in extra on this one as well. But this is the key to understanding what is unfolding inside UK. The idea that the government in Westminster is controlling the country is becoming more and more laughable. It's clear that these powerful organisations are operating under the surface in their networks. And of course, they can only do it on the scale they are doing it by the fact they have access to huge amounts of money through these private hedge funds and others.
Absolutely.
But we'll continue to keep lifting the lid on it. This is the sort of information that the million people on the streets of London need to understand, because what's happening to them, what they're experiencing, is more complicated than the simplistic message being put across. Well, if we're concerned about how the government operates, it was the Daily Express headline which really caught my eye today. It says, Khan must quit over grooming failure. And this is about a whistleblower revealing the horrific extent of capital rape gangs and demands. Now, when I read the small text on screen, I was very interested to see that the whistleblower was, in fact, former Met Detective John Wedger. a man who the UK column knows extremely well, and we've done a number of interviews with John. Let's just remind ourselves of what he was talking about. Now, remember, this is a former Met policeman who discovered widespread child abuse in London, children being taken out of the protective care system, given drugs, prostituted via various groups. But when he brought a report together to take the lid off what he saw happening, the police turned on him. This is just a brief quote from what John Wedger has had to say back in 2018. What happened from the time that you whistle blew on this really outrageous abuse of children in London?
Oh, I mean, like I mentioned in our audio interview, I genuinely thought that as soon as I whistle blew that things would start going in the right direction. I thought I'd get the backing. I mean, as well, I mean, I'm coming forward in respect to some really, really horrendous and serious crimes. Having worked as an investigator for many years and realised the protection that we would afford our victims, our informants and our witnesses of crime, I thought the same would be afforded to me. And it was the total opposite. I was also warned by other police whistleblowers that I was put in contact with, and that's namely Lenny Harper, who exposed the Hope de la Garenne, Maggie Oliver, who was the one who sort of brought forward about the Rochdale child abuse cover-ups, and they both said the same thing: look, they're going to come for you, and they'll come hard, and they did. And the onslaught was just unbelievable. But what was said to me by my sort of OPCU commander at the time, and he turned around and said, you know, you're looking at, you carry on, you're looking at losing your home, your job and your children. And as the years prevailed, you know, the next 3 years that I went through this campaign of bullying against me, there were
led by the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah, solely led by the Met Police. The words were predictive because whoever was behind it, I nearly lost my home because my wages were stopped. They tried on 3 major occasions. Each time there was 3 offences I was accused of, which was said to me by both Maggie and Lenny, look, they'll serve you what are called gross misconduct, which each one would have caused me to lose my job, and each one would have a dual purpose. That would be an internal investigation also, would be passed to the Crown Prosecution Service. So I nearly lost my job on 9 occasions. And also, if I can elaborate at some point, that there was a campaign, because I was bringing up 4 kids on my own, to sort of undermine my role as a parent.
This is quite an extraordinary interview with John Wedger, and the key point here is that when he, as a police officer, tried to expose the institutional abuse of children, which included the local authorities and so-called care homes, it was the police and those institutions which turned on him. So what we see is that the whole structure permitting the abuse of children, whether it's via Asian gangs or not, the structure is the structure of abuse. And this is so important for people to grasp, that the rape gangs that have been made such a big thing of, particularly by Tommy Robinson, are one small subset of a system which can only exist, an abuse system which can only exist by virtue of the fact that the institutional system, including the government, including local authorities, including the police, is itself corrupt. So in the, just hold it up for you, this is the actual paper, double page spread inside on this article. But of course, the Daily Express says, well, it's only Sadiq Khan that's the problem, when the reality in John Wedger's testimony is the whole system, including politicians and Westminster and the local authorities and the police, were all involved in the cover-up of child abuse. Why? Because they are part of that abusive system. Now, let's just remind ourselves that a couple of days ago, I highlighted the fact that Harriet Harman had been called forward to produce a report on sexual harassment and abuse within the legal system amongst barristers. This was the actual BBC report where a lady was complaining that she'd been molested actually by a barrister. And Baroness Harriet Harman KC had been put forward in order to produce a report. Now, we reminded our audience that, of course, Harman could not be considered a safe pair of hands in any way due to her history with support towards the paedophile information exchange. We asked very clearly, was she a safe pair of hands? And we pointed out that the National Council for Civil Liberties, which she was part of, continued to defend having Pi as a member. And as late as September 1983, an NCCL officer was quoted in the Daily Mail saying that the group was campaigning to lower the age of consent to 14. Now, you've just heard an ex-policeman, John Wedger, speak. Let's have a listen to what Bill Maloney, a man who was abused in the so-called care system along with his siblings, had to say to Harriet Harman.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to get the other side. Okay. Harriet, right, if I can just give you 1 minute. We're talking about child abuse. We'd just like to talk to you about the cuts and how it's going to affect child abuse. Harriet, you don't want to talk about child abuse. I understand that, Harriet, but you're here to talk to people on the street, and we represent... So Harriet Harman doesn't want to talk to us about child abuse today.
She didn't say that.
Okay, at the moment she doesn't.
She didn't say
Well, that's what he said to me. I gave her a chance. Mind your own business. Let's go again. Let's go again. Let's go again. Chop, chop.
This way.
You've got to get the face. Get the face. Harriet. That's common assault. You'll get arrested for that.
I'm a woman.
I know it's a woman's right.
Sorry.
Harriet, get on me. Harriet, I need to push you on this. Harriet, why won't you talk to us about child abuse, Harriet? You're part of the government. Don't touch me because don't you just touch me. Right, so Harriet, Harriet is not willing to talk about child abuse. And how are the cuts going to affect child abuse? How are the cuts going to affect child abuse, Harriet? Harriet, how are the cuts? How are the cuts going to affect child abuse, Harriet?
I'm very sorry, she's talking to people who've come here for
so Harriet's gone to the police officer here, and we do carry a press pass, and Harriet Harman does not today wish to talk to us about child abuse. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you, officer. Right. That was Harriet Harman. She didn't want to talk to us about child abuse, and I think I know why. In 1978, when she became a solicitor, she urged the ministers to make it legal for people to be allowed to take sexually explicit images of children, and she wanted that to be made legal as long as the children in the images hadn't been harmed or abused. So that's Harriet Harman. Harriet Harman was in favour of making sexually explicit images of children, and she urged ministers to do that. So maybe that's why Harriet Harman didn't want to talk to us about child abuse. Thank you very much.
So a question is that if this lady's been promoted by the government in order to investigate abuse, how do they see her now? Let's have a look at how she describes herself.
Well, to win a Lifetime Achievement Award in law, it feels like such an honour and a privilege, and even more so to be amongst all these women who've been nominated for and winning awards in every different aspect of the law, especially because it's not so long ago that really there were hardly any women in the law. So these women are all inspiring pioneers.
So the key point here, and it's a very simple point, is if these are the types of people that are not only in government, but they're helping to control how other people are educated and trained in serious positions as barristers, for example, is it any wonder that the country is at the point of breakdown? And if we come back to John Wedger there in that expose article, clearly describing that the child trafficking system is run through government itself. We're not talking about an Asian system. We're talking about a system that operates and did operate through a largely white ruling class, both politically and through the wider establishment. We'll discuss this more. Over to you, Ben.
Over to Diane, I think.
Oh, I beg your pardon, Diane.
I've spoken enough.
Right. Well, no. Okay. Getting a little bit passionate on that one, and I think it's justified.
Absolutely, Diane, it's justified. Yes.
Diane, of course, you're on the hot subject of UNESCO and what it's up to in its indoctrination. What's the word? Indoctrination capacity.
Something like that. Yes. I mentioned last week that I would do some more investigation into the Digital Education Week that took place in Paris with UNESCO earlier this month. But first, I want to go back to 2023 when this report was published. This is called Guidance for Generative AI in Education and Research. So this was kind of one of the first things that we saw with UNESCO trying to look at how AI would be used in education. So if we look at what it said, and again, these are all very long reports. As is my typical habit, I have read these reports so that nobody else has to. And what this says, for just some quotes from a few of these reports that I'll go through, this says that it is going toward a human-centered approach to the use of generative AI. Quote, the guidance, which is this policy document, which is many, many pages, stresses the need for educational institutions to validate generative AI systems on their ethical and pedagogical appropriateness for education. It calls on the international community to reflect on their long-term implications for knowledge, teaching, learning, and assessment. So this was 2023. These tools, the educational tools, were just starting to come out. So then we come into 2025, where they've obviously been doing a lot of work for the past 2 years. This is the event, again, that I mentioned last week, Digital Learning Week 2025, which was called AI and the Future of Education, Disruptions, Dilemmas, and Directions. So if we just take a little bit from the synopsis of this Digital Learning Week, that is from what I just shared in the slide, it says that this is charting pathways for equitable. So again, there's that word equity, which is not the same as equality, of course, ethical and human-driven AI integration in education, ensuring technology serves as a force for inclusive progress. So there's that word inclusive. Once again, we see these words over and over again as when we look at globalist language around education, which of course ties to Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. So if we go on from there, I want to just talk a little bit about the opening session. So this is an AI generated image of this lady here. Her name is Stefania Giannini. She is the Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO. When she opened the conference on the 2nd of September, it was live streamed and it's now available on YouTube if you want to watch the whole thing. She starts with this sort of AI image of herself with her voice in the background, and it's sort of opening up and saying AI has become a new actor and it's the future of education, it's disruptive. And then suddenly, by somehow, some sort of miracle, Stefania herself, the actual person, walks out on the stage. So how about that? That was surprising. She makes a joke about how that AI Stefania was really the real Stefania, and she was just the fake one, the real one. So there's our inversion of language once again. And she goes on to give the speech about talking about the use of AI in education. So I just want to read a little bit of what is essentially the transcript from part of this talk. And she says, for example, let's meet a student. Cristiano is a secondary school student in Ghana. His school uses Rory, which is an AI tutor on WhatsApp. And Cristiano can ask questions at any time in his only language, which is a very important, not obvious point. And for the first time, we can say a student has something like a private tutor in his pocket. This is a revolution, really. Now, move to Princeton and meet Professor Bernard. He is a colleague teaching history of science. He actually asked his students to use AI on a test. And the system can analyze arguments, connect different ideas, all the dots through history and society, and also engage in what I would define as a Socratic dialogue interaction with the students. He described this experience, quoting his words, exhilarating, terrifying, even sublime. So she goes on to give these examples and talks about how AI is this major disruptor in education and what it's going to do. And so it raises a lot of questions, which I will continue to investigate. The obvious one, first of all, for me, is what are teachers for? What is the point of the teacher if AI is going to be in the student's pocket, or professors are asking students to use AI to actually do their exams? Well, there's a couple of ideas about this. One is that, and I experienced this myself before I left the education sector, is that the idea is that AI is apparently going to take over the easy stuff. So teachers teaching facts, for example, is going to be taken over by AI to allow teachers to do, and this is actually in some of the policy documents that I've got coming up next. If we look at these next very long policy documents that were published just this year, AI and the Future of Education, Disruptions, Dilemmas, and Directions. So this is a very long book with several chapters written by different people. What does this say in it? It says, well, for example, shaping the use of AI in education through collective dialogue. So in the introduction, it says that it explores the philosophical, ethical, and pedagogical dilemmas posed by disruptive influence of AI in education, bringing together insights from global thinkers, leaders, and change makers. The collection challenges assumptions, surfaces frictions, provokes contestation, and sparks audacious new visions for equitable, there's that word again, equitable, human-machine co-creation. So now we're starting to see humans and machines working together. This is not a teacher and a student. This is not students working together. This is machine and people working together for equitable co-creation, creating together with machines. So what does that sound like? Does that sound like transhumanism potentially? We can leave it there with that topic. But what it does say is that teachers are going to be used for human development, relating to students. This involves, of course, the topic of social emotional learning, which needs to be a few other segments I think I will need to do in the future. But essentially, social emotional learning is one of the things that we are fighting against in curriculums across the West, which involves these 5 main points: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. So now teachers are taking over the things that really parents should probably be doing and not necessarily being left up to the schools. They also put one other document that they produced for the result of this conference or before this conference is called AI in Education, Protecting the Rights of Learners. This says that they are safeguarding the right to education in the digital era. Quote, "The rapid digitalization of education, accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic," so there's that again, "and the development of generative artificial intelligence is reshaping education and learning. These advancements also come with challenges, including the risks of exacerbating existing inequalities, privacy and safety concerns, and emerging issues relating to ethics, governance, and," there's that word again, "equity. This report emphasizes that all efforts must prioritize a human-centered and rights-based use of digital technology to benefit all learners." Now, what I will say about the idea of right to education, on the surface, of course, that sounds fabulous. Of course, we want children to have whatever education they need. But when we look at things like the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, it basically does give children the same rights as adults, which could then lead to things like consent to viewing inappropriate content, looking at the sexualization of children, potentially, child abuse, sexual child abuse, and that opens it up because children have the same right to do whatever adults do according to this particular piece of documentation. So we need to continue to look at this.
Diane, thank you very much. And we got a little bit of amusement to end on.
Thankfully, I think we need it today. This was an article that was in BBC Earth. It was published on the 5th of September. And I put this on my Facebook page a few days ago, and it's created quite a bit of discussion from some of the UK column audience that follow me on Facebook. The article is titled, "How Eating Insects Became a Conspiracy Theory." And so the headline underneath that, sort of the subheadline, secondary headline says, "Insect protein is healthy and sustainable, but it is now also at the center of a far-reaching conspiracy theory." So if they're saying on the one hand it's healthy and sustainable, but it's also part of a conspiracy theory, which is the case. And what's really interesting about this article, it's quite long, and I would encourage people to look at it themselves because there's too much that we can't discuss here in our time left. But it does talk about the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset, which they claim in the article was an effort to reduce global inequality and advance environmental initiatives during the COVID-19 pandemic. So whatever they were doing while we were locked up in our houses. But to conspiracy theorists, they say it was proof that they were trying to use the pandemic as a way to reorganize society, according to the ADL's Center on Extremism. And it goes on to say that the WF did, in fact, publish an article saying that insects are more sustainable than meat, both in terms of tackling climate change and food insecurity. And it goes on to explain from Professor Stephen Lewandowski from the University of Bristol how to fight conspiracy theories. And I've read a lot by him. He's a professor of cognitive science. And what he said was the advice to people is that you have to keep pushing your family. So he said, quote, "You're not going to be successful if you say, 'Uncle Bruce, you're crazy. Don't believe this utter nonsense.' But instead, you can ask, 'What function do your beliefs serve? And why are you believing this?'" And he says it's not the kind of thing that you can do over a single dinner conversation, apparently. So I think some people might have some work out for them if they have an Uncle Bruce who is a conspiracy theorist. So there's some tips for you.
Okay. Diane, thank you very much for that. We're going to leave our viewers today with a lovely image which you took, countryside into the far, far distance. Just a quick description, Diane.
Yeah, this is Hartside Pass, sort of up here in the north of England. I didn't take this photo, but I took one very similar to it. But the weather was terrible when I was up there yesterday. But it's up over 1,900 feet. You can see the Lake District. You can see the Solway Firth. You can maybe see south of Scotland. And it's very high and very beautiful. And yesterday was very cold and windy. But I just want to say a reminder to our viewers to get out there and enjoy nature. And just remember that the world is out there for you to explore and enjoy, and not to get yourself too caught up into all of this, because it's best for all of us if we have a little bit of a break now and then.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Diane. Thank you also, Ben. And I'll just end by saying that if you're one of the, we'll say, the million people who turned up in London to demonstrate about things you're concerned about, what's happening to your country, well done, and a special well done if you were there and enjoyed a social day with people in a well-behaved way. And I'm sure that was 99.99% of those present. So we'll end on that positive note. For members of UK Column, we'll be back for UK Column Extra in a few moments. For everybody else that's joined us for the news, thank you so much. Share our material, and we'll be back with another news on Wednesday at 1. See you then. Bye-bye.